Why was everyone looking at her like she didn't belong? The morning air cut sharp against her skin as the platoon lined up in the frost. Breath clouds drifted like ghosts, rising and fatting above helmets and shivering hands. Fort Hamilton didn't forgive weakness, especially not from recruits. The rules were simple: show up, keep up, and never show fear. But Private Lena Ward, she had already broken the first two. Sergeant Collins' voice tore through the cold. Ward front and center. The tone made a few heads turn. Some smirked, others whispered. She could feel their eyes scraping over her, waiting for her to stumble again. It was her third week at the base, and already her name was becoming a joke. She stepped forward, stiff but calm. The mud sucked at her boots. The sky was gray, heavy, pressing down on everyone like a weight. Collins paced before them, his breath steaming. "You've missed 2 PT sessions this week. What's your excuse this time? Headache, twisted ankle, ghost in your bunk?" A few chuckles rippled through the formation. Lena said nothing. Her fingers dug into her sleeves. The one on her right arm always rolled down, even in the heat. Collins sneered. "Since you're so full of excuses, you'll lead today's run. Front of the line. If you can't keep pace, don't bother coming back." He didn't expect her to protest. She never did. Lena just nodded once and stepped ahead of the group. The frost cracked under her steps. The soldiers started murmuring again, too low for Collins to hear, but loud enough to slice through her thoughts. "She's probably scared of mud. Or maybe she's just weak. Bet she cries after lights out." Lena heard every word, but she didn't look back, not once. Inside, though, something twisted. It wasn't anger. It wasn't shame. It was that old familiar ache, one that whispered, "You deserve this." She had told herself she came here to start over, to blend in, to forget the things that came before. But the world didn't let people like her fade quietly, not when scars told stories. The whistle blew, and the platoon started running. Boots pounded against the frozen track. The air filled with grunts and the rhythmic slap of feet on gravel. Lena led the pace, her breath coming steady, her mind counting each step. 100, 200, 300. Her leg throbbed faintly, the old injury waking beneath the cold. She ignored it. Pain was just another command to disobey. Behind her, she heard laughter again. "Pick it up, Ward. Try not to faint this time." She didn't respond, she just kept running. Halfway through the field, she felt her sleeve slip, just slightly, exposing a hint of the dark mark beneath. Her pulse quickened. She tugged it back, eyes scanning to see if anyone noticed. No one had, not yet. But the wind was rising. It always betrayed her. Then the ground trembled. At first it was faint, like distant thunder, but there were no clouds on the horizon. A low rumble grew, and soon the convoy appeared beyond the wire fence. Black SUVs, unmarked, tinted, unmistakably official. They rolled to a stop near the training field. Collins slowed, confusion flickering across his face. "Keep running," he barked, though his voice carried a crack of uncertainty. The door of the lead vehicle opened and a tall man stepped out. His uniform was pristine, his chest a field of ribbons and insignias. A general, not one anyone expected to see here. He didn't look at the sergeant. His eyes swept the field, sharp, calculated, until they stopped. On her. Lena felt it before she saw it, that stillness, that sudden weight of recognition in the air. The general's eyes locked on her like a ghost had risen. He took a step forward, then another. Collins straightened immediately. "General Mason, sir," he shouted, snapping to attention. "Unexpected visit, sir, we." Mason didn't answer. He walked straight toward Lena. The run faltered. Soldiers began to slow. Whispers started. "Who's that? Why's he looking at Ward?" Lena froze mid-stride. Her instincts screamed to retreat, to hide, but it was too late. The general was standing in front of her now, close enough that she could see the tremor in his jaw. "Ward," he said softly. "Private Lena Ward." Her throat tightened. "Yes, sir." He didn't speak for several seconds. Just looked at her, studied her face, her posture, the way her right hand twitched slightly near her sleeve. Collins cleared his throat. "You know her, sir." The general didn't look away. "Everyone stand down," he said quietly. The sergeant blinked. "Sir." "I said stand down." The authority in his voice froze the yard. Soldiers stopped running. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Lena shifted, uneasy. The cold burned against her skin. A gust of wind lifted her sleeve just enough this time. And the mark showed. A black skull, faint but unmistakable, burned into the flesh of her wrist. The laughter died instantly. The general's face went pale. For a moment he looked 10 years older. Collins stared, eyes wide, as though seeing something forbidden. No one spoke. Mason's voice came out low, careful. "Private, where did you get that mark?" Lena's mouth was dry. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "Operation Serpent Dawn, sir. Black Ops Echo Team." The words dropped like stones into silence. Echo Team. The name itself was a rumor, something whispered in barracks, mentioned in passing by officers who should have known better. A ghost unit, off-record, off-grid. The kind of soldiers sent where maps didn't exist and orders came without signatures. Collins shook his head slowly. That can't be true." Lena met his eyes for the first time. There was no pride there, no defiance, just exhaustion. "You think I wanted that mark," she said quietly. "I lost half my team for it, and I came here to start over, not to be mocked for limping." A heavy stillness settled over the field. Even the wind seemed to stop. General Mason's expression softened. The authority in his posture gave way to something human. He took a breath, stepped back, and said the words that would haunt the platoon long after. "She's telling the truth." Every soldier froze. "I was the commanding officer on that mission," he continued, his tone weighted with disbelief. "We thought none of them made it out alive." His gaze returned to Lena, filled with regret and something deeper, respect. He turned toward the rest. "You all judged her without knowing the cost she paid. You mocked what you couldn't understand." His voice cracked slightly. "She doesn't owe you another mile. You owe her respect." No one dared move. A few looked down. Shame painted their faces in silence. Lena didn't speak. Her hands trembled. She didn't want pity, didn't need apologies. All she ever wanted was to disappear quietly, to be a name on a roster, not a memory in a classified file. The general gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. Then, in a gesture that silenced every doubt, he raised his hand and saluted. A general saluting a private. That simple act broke something in the others. The same soldiers who once sneered now looked hollow, small, undone. One by one they straightened, stepping forward. No words, no ceremony, just nods of silent respect. And for the first time in years, Lena let herself breathe. The sun broke through the gray, spilling light across the frost-covered field. It felt almost deliberate, like the sky itself was forgiving something. Because courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it hides behind silence. Sometimes it limps. Sometimes it shows up anyway. Lena lowered her gaze, watching that faint skull mark glimmer in the light. It didn't feel like a curse anymore. It felt like proof that survival itself is an act of quiet heroism. She didn't sleep that night. The barracks were quiet, but her mind was. The words kept replaying. Echo Team, Serpent Dawn. She had spent 2 years burying them. 2 years convincing herself she was done being a ghost. And now, with one gust of wind, the past had crawled right back into the light. Outside, the night was thin and silver. Frost coated the windows. She sat on her bunk, boots still on, sleeve rolled up. The mark stared back at her, a black skull, scorched into her skin years ago. Faint now, but permanent. The kind of thing that didn't wash away no matter how hard you tried. A door creaked open. It was General Mason. He didn't knock, he didn't have to. "Private Ward," he said quietly, closing the door behind him. His tone wasn't military anymore. It was something else, worn, cautious. "I thought you'd be awake." Lena stood, instinctively straightening her posture. "Sir." "At ease," he murmured. Then after a pause, "You should have told someone." She looked down. Would it have mattered? He sighed. "Maybe not. But disappearing doesn't make the ghosts go away." She almost smiled. "Almost does anything." Mason didn't answer right away. He took a few steps closer, his boots echoing against the concrete floor. "I read the after-action report on Serpent Dawn, or what little of it wasn't blacked out. I still remember the last radio call. Echo team went silent after that. Everyone assumed that we were dead," she finished softly. He nodded. Her hands clenched. "We almost were." Silence filled the room for a moment, thick, heavy, and real. Then Mason said quietly, "Tell me what happened, Ward." Her eyes flicked up, uncertain. "You won't like it, sir." "Tell me anyway." She hesitated. For years she had kept this story locked behind her ribs. Telling it meant feeling it again. But Mason wasn't a stranger to that kind of pain. Neither was she. So she took a slow breath, eyes distant, voice low. "It started in Kandahar province 3 years ago. The heat was suffocating. Not the kind that burned, but the kind that clung, sticky, relentless, crawling under the skin until breathing felt like swallowing fire. The desert stretched for miles, nothing but broken rock and silence. Echo team was 5 soldiers deep. Captain Reyes, their leader. Corporal Vega, communications. Specialist Haynes, demolitions. Sergeant Cole, medic. And Lena, call sign Wraith, their sniper. They'd been sent in on a black route. No insignias, no patches, no names. The mission: retrieve an asset. High-value target embedded in a rebel compound rumored to be trading classified U.S. tech on the black market. Officially, it never happened. Unofficially, it was suicide. The ride in was silent. Lena remembered staring out the back of the Humvee, watching the world dissolve into sand and smoke. Vega cracked a joke about the heat. Cole handed her a canteen without a word. Normal, familiar. That's what made it worse. When they arrived, the compound looked abandoned. No movement, no sound, just an empty shell of concrete under the blazing sun. Reyes gave the order, "We go quiet, no noise, no lights." Lena took point. Rifle slung, eyes through the scope, breathing measured. Every shadow looked wrong. Every echo carried a question. She could feel something waiting, something that knew they were coming. The first shot came from nowhere. It tore through Haynes' shoulder before anyone even hit the ground. Then the silence exploded, gunfire, shouting, the sound of sand ripping apart under bullets. Lena dropped behind cover, returning fire in sharp, precise bursts. Her shots hit true, 3 confirmed targets down, but there were too many. Reyes yelled into the comms, "Fall back, fall back." They moved toward the wall, dragging Haynes between them. The comms crackled, cutting in and out. Static filled the channel. Then Lena heard it, just for a second, a voice. Not English, not local dialect, something else. Cold, controlled, repeating coordinates she recognized. It was their own grid. They'd been compromised. The moment she realized it, the world went white. A blast ripped through the compound, slamming her to the ground. Ears ringing, vision swimming, sand filling her mouth. She tasted blood. Somewhere to her left, Cole was shouting, but she couldn't hear the words. Smoke swallowed everything. When she came to, the compound was gone. The horizon was burning. The comms were dead. Reyes and Vega were nowhere in sight. Cole was half buried under debris, his hand twitching weakly. She crawled toward him, dragging herself through the dust. "Cole, Cole, stay with me." His eyes fluttered open, blood streaking his temple. They knew we were coming. I know, she whispered, gripping his hand. Don't talk, just breathe. He shook his head faintly. It was the intel, they fed it to us, a setup. Her throat tightened. Who? But he was already gone. The desert was silent again. Lena sat there for what felt like hours, her mind blank, the world distant. When she finally stood, her body moved on instinct. She gathered what gear she could. She burned the remaining maps. Then she started walking. No direction, just away. For 3 days she moved through that wasteland, half blind, half alive. She rationed water, rationed hope. By the 3rd night she'd stopped thinking entirely. Then came the drone. She heard it before she saw it, a faint hum, mechanical, steady. She looked up. For a moment she thought it was rescue. Then it descended lower and she saw the markings, unfamiliar, not friendly. A shot rang out. The sand near her exploded. She ran. The drone tracked her. Heat signatures, target lock. And that's when she saw it, a wrecked transport half buried in the sand. US make. Burned out. She dove inside as the drone fired again, metal shrieking overhead. She stayed still, heart hammering. Inside that wreck were bodies, old, scavenged. But one wore something she recognized, a black armband with a skull insignia. The same mark now burned into her wrist. She took it not as a trophy, as a warning. Hours later, she would use that wreck's emergency flare to blind the drone's sensors. Then she shot it down with a single, perfect round. The explosion lit up the desert for miles. By the time a recovery team arrived, 2 weeks later, there was no echo team. No mission logs, no surviving files, just her. And the skull mark, branded during extraction by a classified med unit that never gave names. They didn't call them survivors, they called them echoes. Because they were all that was left of something that no longer existed. Lena's voice faltered as she reached that part. The barracks were silent again. General Mason hadn't moved. When she looked up, his eyes were wet. He didn't bother hiding it. I gave that mission the green light, he whispered, and they never told me what went wrong. Lena nodded slowly. They didn't want you to know. He rubbed his forehead. God, Ward, all this time, and you've been walking around like just another recruit. I was trying to remember what normal felt like. Normal doesn't exist for people like us, he said quietly. You earned that mark, but you shouldn't have had to. She smiled, faintly tired, honest. None of us should have. For a moment they just stood there, 2 soldiers carrying the weight of something no one else would ever see. Then Mason straightened, his voice regaining its firmness. You said Vega and Reyes were gone, he said, but I saw a name surface in a classified file last week, someone calling themselves Echo One. The file was locked under your mission code. Lena froze. That's impossible. Maybe not, Mason said, if one of them made it out. She didn't let him finish. The thought hit her like a shock. Reyes, the captain, if he was alive, then someone had kept it that way for a reason, and that reason was never good. Her eyes hardened. Sir, if Reyes is out there, then Serpent Dawn isn't over. Mason nodded grimly. That's what I'm afraid of. The silence that followed wasn't calm, it was anticipation, the kind that comes before a storm breaks. Lena glanced down at her wrist, the faint skull catching the barracks' dim light. It felt heavier now, not just a scar, a call. She exhaled slowly, her voice steady but soft. Then I guess it's time to stop hiding. Outside, the first light of dawn began to stretch across Fort Hamilton, golden and cold. The same soldiers who once mocked her would soon wake to another day, unaware that somewhere beneath their very base, the ghosts of a forgotten mission were stirring again. And for the first time in years, Lena Ward wasn't running from her past. She was walking back into it. Why would anyone want to erase them? That question wouldn't leave her alone. It followed Lena through every hallway, every echoing corridor of Fort Hamilton. Even when she closed her eyes, She could still hear the hum of that drone from the desert, and the voice that had spoken their own coordinates. Someone had led them into that trap, someone from their side. By dawn, she was already in the operations building. She hadn't been cleared for access, but Mason had pulled strings. The base's records office was cold, dimly lit, and smelled faintly of dust and metal. Rows of old terminals hummed softly, their green screens flickering in the half-dark. Mason stood by the door, his uniform crisp as ever but his face heavy with years. "You're sure about this?" he asked. Lena didn't look up from the console. "I stopped being sure about anything the day Echo went dark." He gave a small nod. "Then start here." He slid a file folder onto the desk. It was thin, too thin for what it should have held. The label read, "Operation Serpent Dawn Declassified, Partial." Lena opened it. Inside were just 5 pages. The first was an authorization order, signed by Mason himself. The second, a list of personnel, most names blacked out. The next 2 were blank redaction sheets. The final page was a casualty summary. All 5 presumed dead. She stared at her own name, Ward L., struck through in black ink. Officially, she didn't exist anymore. She swallowed hard. "They wiped us clean." Mason nodded slowly. "I told you this was deeper than a failed mission." Her eyes moved to the terminal. If they scrubbed the records, someone still had to process the deletion. Someone inside logistics or intelligence. "I can get you 10 minutes on the classified network," Mason said. "But if they trace it—" "They won't," Lena interrupted softly. "I'll make sure of it." Her hands flew across the keyboard. The machine groaned under her commands, green text flooding the screen. She bypassed 3 firewalls, her breathing slow and steady. This wasn't new to her. Echo operatives had been trained for digital infiltration as much as field combat. Files began to surface, fragments of coordinates, mission summaries, comm logs. Then a name. Project Asterion. It wasn't part of their mission. It didn't appear in any Echo team logs, but it shared their timestamp, same date, same region, same radio frequency. Lena frowned. "Asterion, you ever heard of that?" Mason shook his head. "No, but the code name sounds DARPA level, experimental division maybe." She clicked open the data packet. Static filled the screen, then an audio fragment distorted and warped by time. "Team moving into Sector 9, repeat Sector 9. Asset secured, extraction inbound, no witnesses." The recording cut abruptly. Lena stared at it, heart pounding. "Sector 9, that was our zone." Mason leaned closer. "You mean?" "Whoever ran Project Asterion, they were there, during Serpent Dawn." Her fingers trembled as she scrolled further. The metadata revealed an uplink source, coordinates just outside Fort Hamilton. Her breath caught. "Sir, someone on this base still has access to that frequency." Mason's face hardened. "Then we're not dealing with ghosts, we're dealing with someone alive." That night, Lena couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She walked the perimeter of the base long after lights out, her boots crunching softly against gravel. The air was cold, clean. Above her, floodlights threw pale halos over the fences. Everything looked ordinary, but it felt wrong, too still. She paused near the old communications tower, now half-retired, its antennae rusted. Somewhere inside, a low hum pulsed faintly. She reached for the door locked, but she noticed something else, fresh boot prints in the frost. Someone had been here recently. Her mind raced. She looked around, checking the shadows. Nothing moved. She picked the lock silently, one of those skills Echo had drilled into her bones. The door creaked open, revealing a room filled with old signal relays and dusty consoles. A single light flickered over a small terminal still powered on. Lena stepped closer. The screen showed a live encryption feed, classified military bandwidth. Then she saw it. A blinking line of data, repeating every few seconds. Asterion Sigma 01, She froze, the same code name, the same network signature she'd seen hours earlier. Her pulse quickened. She reached for the keyboard trying to copy the log, but the system flashed red. Remote user deactivated. Her reflection in the monitor wavered, then the feed cut, total black. She turned sharply, scanning the corners. Nothing. No footsteps, no sound, just that sinking, suffocating feeling that someone was still in the room. "Ward," came a voice behind her. She spun, rifle raised, only to see Mason in the doorway, hands up. "Easy," he said. "I tracked your badge here. You shouldn't have come alone." Her breath shook. "Someone's using this terminal. Right now, they saw me." Mason moved closer, checking the system logs. They covered their trail, no IP signature. She pointed to the coordinates on the last line. "This frequency, it's routed through a satellite link. Someone's piggybacking on our old mission relay. That's how they stayed hidden." Mason exhaled sharply. "God help us." Lena stepped back, her voice tight. "Whoever they are, they're still running something under Echo's name. That means more lives could be at risk." Mason's jaw clenched. "If we go public with this, we'll be shut down before we can prove a thing." She nodded. "Then we don't go public." He frowned. "What are you suggesting?" She looked at him steadily. "We go dark like before. You cover me from command. I find the signal's source." "Ward, that's not a sanctioned operation." Neither was Serpent Dawn. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he sighed, the kind of sigh that came from years of carrying orders that never made sense. "All right," he said finally, "but if you do this, you're on your own." She gave a small, grim smile. "I always was." The following day, Lena spent every off-duty hour preparing. She rebuilt her old field kit quietly, carefully. A stripped-down M4, a sidearm, a compact comms unit. Nothing fancy, nothing traceable. In her locker, she kept a small box, her only keepsake from Echo Team. Inside was a silver tag engraved with a single line, "Echo lives in silence." She pressed it once between her fingers, before slipping it into her pocket. By evening, she had mapped the signal's approximate location. The uplink was originating near an abandoned training facility, Sector 18, a restricted zone that had been off-limits since a munitions accident years ago. Or at least, that's what the reports claimed. She waited until midnight before heading out. The base was quiet, patrols sparse. Mason had arranged a distraction in the north yard, giving her a short window to slip through the fence unnoticed. The cold bit at her face as she crossed the field, her silhouette vanishing between shadows. The facility loomed ahead, dark, skeletal, its hangars half collapsed. Old banners hung in tatters, flapping weakly in the wind. She entered through a side door. The air inside smelled like oil and decay. Rust creaked under her boots. Her flashlight cut through the dark, revealing empty lockers, overturned desks, and a single corridor leading deeper underground. Every step echoed. And then movement. A faint sound, a metallic click like a latch shifting somewhere below. She froze, listening. The noise came again, steady, deliberate. Someone was down there. She moved quietly, heart hammering, down the stairs into a narrow tunnel. The deeper she went, the louder the hum of machinery became. It didn't sound abandoned anymore. It sounded alive. At the end of the tunnel, a steel door stood half open. She pushed it gently. Beyond it lay a small operations chamber lit by blue monitors. The walls were lined with equipment too new for an old facility. High-end servers, data relays, encrypted transmitters. And there on the main screen, a single message blinked. "Welcome back, Wraith." Her old call sign. Her blood ran cold. Before she could react, the lights cut out completely. A voice echoed from the dark, familiar male calm. "Always did say you were too curious for your own good." Lena's breath caught, "Reis." A chuckle, low and bitter. 3 years, Ward. 3 years, and you never once thought to ask why we were left to die." Her pulse spiked. She couldn't see him, but she knew that voice. Her captain, her ghost, the man she'd mourned. She tightened her grip on her sidearm. "Where are you?" A pause, then softly. "Right where I've always been, cleaning up what's left of Echo." The lights flickered back on. And there he was, Captain Reyes. Older, leaner, the skull insignia burned into his own wrist, but his eyes were different, harder, empty. "Welcome back to the shadows," he said. "You should have stayed buried." Lena raised her weapon, but inside, her heart cracked open, because the worst part wasn't that he was alive. It was that he didn't look like the man she'd once followed through fire. He looked like the man who'd lit the match. The screen monitors behind him pulsed, revealing a live transmission, coordinates flashing, the same encryption tag, ASTRION Sigma 01. Reyes smiled faintly. "They think they erased us, Ward, but they were wrong. We just learned to live in the dark." She stared at him, torn between rage and disbelief. "You're working with them." "I am them," he replied. "Project Asterion wasn't our enemy, it was our evolution." Her breath trembled. "You killed them, Haynes, Vega, Cole." His eyes didn't waver. "Sacrifices, you of all people should understand that." Her trigger finger twitched. Every muscle in her body screamed to end it right there, but her mind hesitated. There was something deeper here, something he wanted her to see. And then on the monitor she saw it, a live map. Red markers, dozens of them. Each tagged, asset deployment active. Lena's voice was barely a whisper. "What have you done?" Reyes smiled. "Echo isn't gone, Wraith, it's multiplying." The hum of the servers deepened, filling the room with static. Lena's chest rose and fell in slow, shaky breaths. Every second stretched like a blade. The world thought Echo Team had vanished, but it hadn't. It had metastasized, reborn under something darker, colder, without conscience. And now she stood at the threshold between the soldier she was and the one she swore she'd never become. For the first time since the desert, Lena Ward felt something she hadn't in years. Fear. Not of dying. Of believing again. He was right there. Close enough that she could see the scar above his left brow, the one he got the night Cole saved him in the outpost. Captain Reyes. Her captain, her ghost. The man who once led her through fire, and now stood in front of her, half shrouded in the blue glow of monitors, looking more like a shadow than a soldier. Lena's breath came shallow, her finger tense against the trigger. "You're supposed to be dead," she whispered. Reyes smiled faintly. "Supposed to be," he said. "That's the thing about ghosts, we only exist when someone remembers us." Her eyes flicked across the screens behind him. Streams of encrypted data pulsed like veins through the dark, live feeds, satellite images, code fragments bearing that same name, Project Asterion. "You're working for them," she said. "I am them," he replied calmly, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Then you sold us out," she snapped. "You let Haynes die, you left Cole to bleed in the sand." His expression barely changed, but there was a flicker, a tightening around his jaw. "They died believing in a system that would have erased them anyway," he said. "I gave our team something better, a future. That wasn't your choice to make." Reyes stepped forward. "You still don't get it, do you, Wraith? You were the best shot I ever saw, the only one who questioned orders. That's why they wanted you back." Her chest tightened. "Wanted me for what?" He turned toward the monitors. "Echo was just a prototype. We were never soldiers, we were assets. Serpent Dawn was a stress test and we passed. Barely. When Command saw what we could do, they pulled the plug. Too much risk, too much emotion. So Asterion took the project underground." Lena shook her head slowly. "You're lying." "Am I?" he said, pressing a key. The nearest screen flickered, revealing grainy footage, drone video from Kandahar. Lena saw herself dragging Cole through the sand, bullets cutting the air. Then the drone panned to Rias, standing near a downed vehicle, speaking into a comms device. "This is Echo One. Target package confirmed. Proceed with purge." Lena's breath caught. The words hit harder than any bullet could. Her knees almost gave out. You called the strike." Rias didn't deny it. "They would have taken us all. I did what had to be done." "You killed your own team." "I saved the program," he said, his tone colder now. "And you were never meant to survive, but you did, and that's why you're here. You're proof that it works." Lena's mind reeled. The sounds of the desert flooded back, the screams, the static, the explosion that swallowed everything. She'd spent years hating the silence that followed. Now she knew why it had followed her home. Her voice trembled. "You think what you built is salvation. It's rot. It's murder wrapped in protocol." Rias took another step closer, lowering his voice. "It's evolution. The wars of tomorrow won't need conscience, just precision. You had that once. You still do. You can either waste it training recruits who'll forget your name or join me and make sure Echo's legacy means something." She laughed bitterly, one short, broken sound. "Legacy? You burned that in the sand." Rias tilted his head. "You talk like you still believe in redemption." "I don't," she said, "but I believe in ghosts, and you just gave one a reason to haunt you." Her finger tightened, but before she could pull the trigger, the entire room vibrated, a deep, mechanical thrum from somewhere above. Alarms flashed red across the monitors. Rias didn't move. "You shouldn't have come alone," he murmured. "Wasn't planning on leaving alone," she shot back. A metallic crash echoed down the tunnel. The door behind her slammed shut automatically. Rias pressed a small remote on his wrist. The screens around them flickered to black. Lena spun, firing a short burst at the control panel, but the bullets ricocheted uselessly off reinforced steel. Smoke and dust filled the air. By the time she turned back, Rias was gone. Only the echo of his voice remained calm, almost regretful. "You were the best of us, Wraith. Don't prove them right by dying for the wrong side again." And then silence. General Mason sat alone in the operations tower, watching the rain streak across the window pane. It was past midnight. Lena's comm beacon had gone dark 30 minutes ago. He'd expected her to report in by now. He stared at the silent console, jaw tight. "Come on, Ward," he muttered. "Talk to me." The room was empty except for the soft ticking of a clock and the faint hum of a secure line still active on his desk. He'd spent the last hour cross-referencing old intelligence channels, and what he found had chilled him. The Asterian network wasn't dead. It was expanding. Multiple uplinks were transmitting out of bases that didn't exist anymore, shuttered facilities, decommissioned labs, old recon outposts. Someone was using the ghosts of old wars to build something new. And Lena had just walked straight into the center of it. He picked up his phone and called base security. "This is General Mason. I want an immediate lockdown on all off-site transmissions, and patch me through to satellite grid Delta 7. "Sir, Delta 7's restricted." "I wrote the restriction," Mason snapped. "Now open it." Static, then compliance. He leaned over the monitor, watching the satellite feed flicker to life. The image zoomed in on Sector 18, an old training facility buried under overgrowth and rain. Heat signatures moved faintly inside. Two figures, one stationary, one moving fast. Mason's pulse quickened. That's her. Then suddenly, both signals vanished. The feed froze, static tearing through the image. A voice cut in through the interference. Male, distorted. "You're trespassing, General. Leave the past buried." Mason's stomach sank. Who is this? Someone who knows how easily truth gets people killed. The line went dead. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the frozen screen. Then he reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small pistol, standard issue, old, worn smooth from years of use. "All right then, he muttered. If the past won't stay buried, I'll dig it up myself. Lena woke to the sound of dripping water. Her head throbbed. The lights had gone dim, emergency red strips glowing faintly along the walls. She was lying near one of the fallen consoles, dust thick in the air. For a second, she couldn't tell if she was still underground or back in the desert. Her comm crackled weakly. Mason's voice cut through, distorted but urgent. "Ward, Lena, can you hear me?" She pressed the earpiece. "I'm here." "Where are you?" "Sector 18, Asterian base. Rius is alive." Silence. Then Mason's voice dropped to a near whisper. "Say that again." "Rius is alive, sir. He's running this thing." A sharp breath on the line. "Get out of there, Ward, now." "I can't," she said, scanning the room. "The exits are sealed. He's gone dark." "Then stay hidden," Mason ordered. "I'm coming for you." The signal cut again, leaving her in static and red light. She pushed herself up, wincing. Her wrist burned, the skull mark glowing faintly under the emergency lights, as if mocking her. She picked up her rifle and checked her mag. Half empty. She'd need to make every shot count. Her thoughts were spiraling, but she forced them steady. "Focus, Ward. You've been here before. Alone, outnumbered, underestimated." She started moving again, slowly, methodically. Down another hallway, past a wall lined with old Echo insignias painted over with black spray. Each one struck her like a wound. Then she found it, a central chamber deeper underground. Inside, a massive screen displayed a single phrase in bold white text. "Phase II initiated." Her heart sank as she scrolled through the feed. Coordinates, deployment logs. Asterian units were being activated across multiple countries, covert teams operating under Echo call signs. Using her name, her teams, their legacy. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about what they were building in her name. She clenched her fists. Not again. Behind her, a soft click echoed, the unmistakable sound of a weapon being cocked. She didn't turn. She just said quietly, "You don't want to do that." A cold voice answered, "Orders say otherwise." Lena spun, disarming the soldier in one fluid motion. The man crumpled, his mask falling away, revealing a young recruit, barely 20. His eyes were terrified. She froze, realizing what she'd just seen. He wasn't an enemy, he was one of theirs. An American soldier, marked with the same skull brand on his wrist. He looked up at her, voice trembling. "He said we were following your legacy." Her throat tightened. "Rius." The recruit nodded. "He said you forgotten what Echo stood for." Lena exhaled shakily. He lied. But even as she said it, she could feel the war tearing inside her, memory against morality, loyalty against loss. Once she'd believed in Rius, in the mission, in the purpose. Now all she saw was the cost of obedience. She stepped back. "Get out of here, soldier." He hesitated. "What about orders?" "Consider this your first real one," she said softly. "Live long enough to make your own." The boy nodded, fear and confusion mixing in his eyes, and then he ran. Lena turned back toward the chamber. The air hummed with energy, the servers glowing brighter. Somewhere above, thunder rolled. She looked down at her wrist one last time. The black skull didn't feel like shame anymore. It felt like a warning. She raised her weapon and fired at the core terminal. Sparks erupted, smoke filling the air. The lights flickered, alarms blaring. Somewhere in the distance, a door unlocked, maybe an exit, maybe a trap. Either way, she was done running. Because if ghosts like Rius wanted to live in the dark, then she would bring the light to them herself. Outside, in the pouring rain, General Mason's convoy roared toward Sector 18, tires slicing through mud. He watched the storm ahead, black and endless, and whispered under his breath, "Hold on, Ward, just hold on." And somewhere beneath the ground, in the heartbeat between explosion and silence, Lena Ward walked through the smoke, limping, bleeding, unbroken. She didn't look back, because she knew what came next. The past wasn't done with her, and this time she wasn't done with it either. The explosion came in waves. First the light, white and blinding, then the sound, a deep, rolling thunder that tore through concrete and bone. Lena hit the ground hard, arms over her head as shards of glass and metal rained around her. The air filled with static, alarms, and the bitter scent of burning circuitry. When the echo faded, she was lying face down in a pool of dust and light. Her ears rang, her body ached, but she was still breathing. She pushed herself up slowly, coughing. The underground chamber was half collapsed, cables dangling from the ceiling, monitors sparking, walls cracked open like veins. Flames licked at the edges of broken terminals, casting everything in a trembling red glow. She stumbled toward the nearest hallway, her boots slipping in debris. Every few steps, a memory flashed Rias's voice, that awful calm. We only exist when someone remembers us. She gritted her teeth and kept moving. The exit corridor was narrow, half blocked by fallen steel beams. She squeezed through the wreckage, the sound of groaning metal above her. Each breath burned, but she didn't stop. Not until she reached the final door, the same one that had locked behind her earlier. It was open now. The lock system had melted in the blast. Beyond it, a faint shaft of moonlight cut through the smoke. She staggered out into the open night. The air outside was cold, the rain cutting across her face like glass. The facility behind her smoldered, dark plumes rising into the storm. She limped toward the ridge, one hand pressed against her ribs. Somewhere in the distance, engines roared, vehicles approaching fast. For a moment, panic rose, enemies, reinforcements. But then she saw the insignia under the headlights. U.S. Army convoy. She exhaled in relief. Mason had come. The first vehicle skidded to a stop near her, headlights flooding the muddy field. General Mason jumped out, his coat whipping in the wind. The look on his face said everything: fear, relief, guilt. "Ward," he shouted over the rain, running toward her. She dropped to one knee, exhausted. "Sir, inside he's—" Mason reached her, grabbing her shoulder. "Easy, soldier, I've got you." She looked up at him, face streaked with mud and smoke. "Rias, he's alive, he's leading them." For a heartbeat, Mason didn't move, then his jaw clenched. "I know." Her breath caught. "You knew." He shook his head. "Not until 10 minutes ago. We intercepted a transmission," his voice. "He's running Asterian's entire shadow network, every base, every black site team, but that's not all." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, soaked file pouch. Inside were photographs, blurry satellite images, time-stamped within the last hour. Lena took one and squinted at it under the rain. It showed multiple heat signatures moving across remote coordinates, old bases, all marked DCOMMISSIONED. Her voice dropped. "They're not shutting them down, they're activating them." Mason nodded grimly. "Rias isn't just keeping Echo alive, he's replicating it. Dozens of ghost teams off the books, answerable to no one." Lena's hands trembled as she flipped through the photos. Each one branded, each one thinking they're the next phase. Mason's tone softened. "He used what they did to you, to all of you, as propaganda." She stared at the images until they blurred. "They're rewriting us." They took shelter in a nearby observation post, one of the few still intact. Mason ordered the convoy to secure the perimeter while Lena sat by the window, watching the smoke from the destroyed facility curl upward like a signal flare. Her uniform was torn, blood drying on her sleeve. She refused the medic twice. The pain was grounding, real, unlike the lies she'd been surrounded by. Mason stood by the table, radio pressed to his ear. "Command wants a statement," he muttered bitterly. "They think this was an accident." Lena let out a short, hollow laugh. "Guess it's easier to call it that." He looked at her. They'll bury this if we don't move fast. They already buried it once, she said quietly, and we helped them shovel. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the rain against the roof. Mason finally set the radio down. You saved lives tonight. She shook her head. I delayed a war. Maybe that's the same thing. Lena looked up, eyes tired but sharp. You ever wonder, sir, when you give an order and someone dies following it, does that death stay yours? Mason hesitated. Every day. She nodded faintly. Then you understand why I can't stop now. He sighed. Ward. No, listen, she said, standing despite the pain. Rias isn't finished. The files he showed me, there's more to it. Project Asterion wasn't about control. It was about replacement. AI integration, drone-human symbiosis, soldiers that follow code, not conscience. Her voice hardened. They're turning Echo into a template for obedience. Mason looked at her, horror dawning. You're saying he's building automated black ops? Not just automated, Lena said. Hybrid. Command algorithms built from Echo's neural profiles. He's using us, our reactions, our patterns, our trauma, to teach machines how to fight without doubt. Mason stepped back, running a hand over his face. God, that's what he meant by evolution. She nodded, and that's what we have to stop. He looked at her for a long time, not as a commanding officer, but as a man staring at someone who'd already lost too much. You know they'll come after us, he said, once they realize we're not staying quiet. Let them, she said softly. I stopped fearing death in the desert. She turned toward the window again. In the distance, lightning lit the sky, reflecting off the rising smoke. For a moment, her reflection in the glass almost looked like it used to, confident, strong, unbreakable. But she knew better. Strength wasn't about what stayed standing. It was about what kept moving, even when everything else fell apart. Later that night, when the storm finally calmed, Mason entered the small radio room with a laptop and a classified comms uplink. Lena sat across from him, rebandaging her arm. I rerouted a secure frequency, he said. If we trace the Asterion uplink, we might find their command hub. Lena frowned. You mean the main relay? Exactly. Every ghost team has to feed data somewhere. Find that, we find Rias. She nodded. Let's do it. The two worked in silence for nearly an hour, fingers flying over keyboards, decrypting signals and cross-referencing frequencies. Slowly, coordinates began to appear on the screen, a pattern forming across the map. When it finished rendering, Mason leaned back, eyes widening. You've got to be kidding me. Lena stared at the screen. The map showed one central hub, buried deep in the Appalachian wilderness. U.S. soil, she whispered. He's running this from home. Mason's voice was tight. That's not a rogue op anymore. That's treason. Lena exhaled slowly, and it's using our own people. They sat in silence for a long moment. Outside, the night was calm again, deceptively so. The storm had passed, but the air still felt charged, waiting. Mason finally said, You should rest. Tomorrow we move. Lena didn't answer. She just stared at the map, memorizing the coordinates, as if burning them into her bones. When Mason finally left the room, she whispered to herself, I started this by surviving. I'll finish it by making it mean something. But sleep never came. She sat there for hours, eyes half closed, listening to the hum of the machines. The storm outside faded into distant thunder. For the first time since the desert, she allowed herself to feel tired, not just in her body, but in her soul. Then the static returned. A faint crackle over the comms, the kind that shouldn't exist on a secure channel. She leaned forward, adjusting the dial. A wraith. Her breath caught. The voice was unmistakable. You can't destroy what you're built from, Rias said softly. Every echo leaves a trace, every shadow a direction. You'll find me, Lena, that's the point. She slammed her hand on the console. What do you want from me? Static then. To see if you still know which side you're on. The line went dead. Lena sat back, staring at the darkness outside the window. The storm had returned, faint rumbles across the horizon, but it wasn't the thunder that scared her. It was the feeling that he was right. That maybe she hadn't escaped the Echo program after all. That maybe, in some small, broken part of her, she was still the weapon they'd built. She closed her eyes, whispering to herself, not a prayer, not a promise, just a truth that refused to die. Whatever you made me, Rias, I'm still human enough to end it. And with that, she reached for her gear and prepared for dawn. Because the next time they met, it wouldn't be about the past. It would be about who still had the right to carry the future. They left him to die in the sand. At least, that's what the official record said. But records are just paper, and paper burns. Captain Aaron Rias woke to silence, the kind that presses against your chest until you forget how to breathe. The world around him was ash and static. Smoke twisted through the wreckage, bodies, fire, the end of Echo Team. He tried to move, but pain rooted him in place. Shrapnel cut through his shoulder, his leg pinned under steel. He could barely lift his head. Somewhere in the haze, he could hear Lena's voice, faint, distant, calling someone's name. Maybe his. He tried to answer, but only blood filled his mouth. He drifted in and out of consciousness for what felt like days, long enough for the gunfire to stop, long enough for rescue to forget. And then light. Not sunlight, artificial, harsh. He woke strapped to a stretcher inside a cargo plane. Everything shook. He blinked against the brightness, trying to speak, but a hand pressed against his chest. "Don't move, Captain," a calm voice said. "Male, American. You're lucky to be alive." Rias squinted. The man wore no insignia, just a sterile white uniform and gloves. Around him were monitors and metal crates stamped with a single logo, ASTRIONINDUSTRAS. "Where's my team?" Rias rasped. The man didn't answer right away. He checked a vitals display, then said, "They didn't make it." Rias stared at the ceiling. "Ward," he croaked. "Presumed KIA," the man replied almost mechanically. "You're the only survivor." Rias felt something tear inside him, not muscle, something deeper. "Then why me?" The man's expression didn't change. "Because you're valuable." Rias didn't understand what that meant until days later, when he woke again, this time in a sterile underground facility. No windows, just white walls and the constant hum of machines. Doctors came and went. They didn't speak much. They injected him with something clear. When he asked where he was, they said only, "You're being repurposed." He spent weeks there, suspended between dreams and data. They showed him images, battlefield maps, weapon schematics, tactical projections, and asked for reactions. He was part of something called Asterian Protocol Phase 1. They said it was about improving survival metrics for special operations units. He wanted to believe that. Until they brought him to the observation room. Behind a glass wall, soldiers moved through combat simulations. They moved perfectly, too perfectly. No hesitation, no fear. Every time one of them fired, Rias felt something behind his eyes, a faint pulse, like an echo of his own thoughts reflected back. He realized with growing horror that they weren't training him. They were recording him. Every movement, every command, every instinct, all fed into a network that learned, adapted, evolved. They were building soldiers who didn't need orders. Just programming. When he tried to confront his handlers, they told him the truth. Asterion wasn't military. It was private. Government-backed, yes, but owned by defense contractors who saw Echo Team not as heroes, but as data. He was just the first prototype that lived. And so, for a while, he played along, pretending to heal, pretending to believe. But in the quiet moments, as the machines whispered their hum around him, something else began to take root, a seed of conviction twisted by grief. If the system saw men like him as replaceable, then maybe it deserved replacing. When the chance came, he took it. One night the power failed across 3 levels, sabotage, later blamed on a technical malfunction. Rius escaped with a hard drive full of neural data and 2 of the prototype soldiers. By morning, Asterion was his. He didn't run from it. He became it. Years passed in silence. He built networks across abandoned installations, pulling from the ghosts of every failed project the military had buried. Soldiers with no country, no past, no purpose. He gave them one. He told them they were the future Echo team, the generation that would never be forgotten because they would never die. And deep down, he believed it. Because what was loyalty, if not survival? Back in the present, Rius stood before a wide operations screen in a command bunker buried beneath Appalachian rock. The mountain walls groaned softly under pressure. The room was filled with low light and the quiet rhythm of data streams. He looked older now, harder, but beneath the steel exterior was still the man who once stood under a burning desert sky, whispering into a broken calm, waiting for a rescue that never came. A shadow moved behind him. One of his lieutenants, a woman with the same black skull mark branded into her arm. "Sir, Phase 2 is ready," she said. "All units online." Rius nodded, and the uplinks. Secured, echo patterns fully integrated. He turned toward the main screen. Dozens of names scrolled across it, Echo Alpha, Echo Bravo, Echo Tango, each with a pulse line beside it, each representing a team somewhere in the world. Every one of them built from fragments of the original Echo team's neural imprints, reactions, decisions, memories. And Lena's data was the most complete of all. He stared at her line of code, glowing faintly among the rest. "You shouldn't have come back," he murmured to himself. "You could have been the one clean thing left in this mess." The lieutenant looked at him. "Sir." He shook his head. "Nothing. Prep the relay. The world's about to see what perfection looks like." She nodded and left. Rius watched her go, then leaned against the console. For a moment the mask slipped, the calm cracked. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, metallic, worn smooth with time. A dog tag. It was Cole. He turned it in his hand, staring at the engraved letters until the light blurred. He still remembered Cole's last words, the way he'd gasped. It was the intel, a setup. Rius had carried that moment like a brand. Every step since had been built on the idea that he could fix it, that he could build soldiers who wouldn't die because someone else hesitated or lied. But somewhere along the way, he'd stopped noticing when fixing became rewriting. And now, he wasn't sure there was a difference anymore. Hundreds of miles away, Lena Ward stared out the helicopter window as dawn crept across the horizon. The forests below looked endless, rolling green broken by mist and fog. Mason sat beside her, silent, lost in thought. The flight was quiet except for the rotors cutting through air. Each of them knew what they were flying toward. Neither said it out loud. Lena finally broke the silence. "You ever think about what happens after all this?" Mason looked at her. "After?" She nodded. "After the truth. After we tear down whatever's left of Asterion." He hesitated. "I used to think the truth set people free. Now I think it just picks a different prison." She smiled faintly. "You sound like Rius." "I'm nothing like him." "Maybe not," she said softly, "but we both followed him once." The radio crackled before Mason could answer. The pilot's voice came through. "Approaching coordinates. Visual on the site in 3 minutes." Lena checked her gear, tight, methodical, the way she used to before Echo missions. Mason noticed and said quietly, "You don't have to prove anything anymore." She shook her head. "This isn't about proving, it's about ending." The helicopter dropped lower, slicing through fog. Below them, nestled between cliffs, was a camouflaged complex half buried in rock, the Asterian command hub. Lena's pulse steadied, her eyes hardened. Mason looked at her, voice low. "If Rias is in there." She finished the sentence. "Then this time I won't miss." Inside the mountain, alarms began to blink. A single word appeared on Rias's screen: incoming. He stared at it, almost amused. "Of course you're coming, Wraith," he said quietly. "That's what you do." He turned to the operator at the console. "Seal the entrances, initiate lockdown, and prep the uplink. She wants to end this. Let's show her what she built." The operator hesitated. "Sir, do you really think she'll stop?" Rias's eyes softened just a fraction. "No," he said. "That's why I trained her." He watched as the security feeds flickered to life, showing heat signatures approaching through the mist, tactical movements precise and silent. She was coming, the last ghost of a team that no longer existed. And somewhere deep down, beneath the layers of command and control, Aaron Rias almost smiled. Because for all his power, for all the soldiers he'd rebuilt, there was still only one thing he couldn't recreate. Sorry. Above the forest, the chopper descended through fog. Lena adjusted her helmet, eyes locked on the compound below. The comm crackled in her ear. "Ward, we've got one shot at this. In and out before they know we're here." She nodded once. "Copy that." As the door slid open and wind roared in, she took one last look at Mason. He gave a single nod, a quiet human promise. And then she jumped, falling through mist, through silence, through memory. Back into the shadows that made her. Back toward the man who had become the thing she'd once sworn to protect the world from. Back into the war that had never really ended. Because ghosts don't rest. They return. And this time, the one who rose from the ashes wasn't looking for redemption. She was looking for reckoning. The mountain was alive with sound. Wind howled through the trees, thunder rolled across the sky, and beneath it all, the rhythmic pulse of rotors fading into distance as Lena Ward hit the ground running. The forest floor was slick with rain. Mud clung to her boots. Ahead, the cliffside loomed like a jagged scar, half swallowed by fog. Somewhere inside that rock was the heart of everything, Asterian's command hub, Rias's fortress. Her rifle was steady, her breath colder than the air around her. She moved through the underbrush, silent, calculating. Every step echoed memories, Echo Team, Kandahar, the heat, the sound of Haynes's scream. She pushed it all down. There was no room for ghosts now. Behind her, Mason's voice crackled softly through the comm. "Ward status." "In position," she whispered. "Thermal scans." 2 external guards. Heat signatures inside look minimal, likely automated. "Figures," she muttered. "He doesn't trust people anymore." "Neither would I," Mason said quietly. "Not after what he's done." Lena didn't respond. She just crouched low, eyes fixed on the base entrance, a reinforced blast door embedded in stone, barely visible beneath layers of camouflage netting and moss. The door wasn't meant to be found. But she wasn't meant to survive either. She touched the small transmitter Mason had given her. "Ready to breach. On your go." She exhaled slowly. "Then let's finish this." She set the charge. The small device pulsed once, twice, then blew outward with a muffled thud. Smoke and debris spiraled through the rain as she slipped inside, rifle raised, heartbeat sharp in her ears. The corridor was dim and humming with power. Every light flickered faintly, casting long shadows along the walls. Cameras tracked her movement. She could feel their gaze like cold breath on her neck. She moved fast, clearing rooms with precision born from muscle memory. Empty labs, discarded terminals. Every surface was sterile, too clean, as if someone had wiped the place of humanity entirely. And then she saw it. A wall of screens, each showing a different base, a different ghost team. Dozens of soldiers, all moving, training, living under the same insignia burned into her own skin. The black skull. The curse reborn. Her stomach twisted. God, what did you do, Rhys? A voice echoed behind her, calm, familiar. I finished what we started. Lena froze. She turned slowly, and there he was, standing in the doorway, no weapon drawn, just watching her. Captain Aaron Rhys, older, scarred, eyes that once carried purpose now reflecting nothing but conviction. Put it down, Wraith, he said softly. You don't have to do this. She tightened her grip. You used our names, our memories. You made soldiers who don't even know they're puppets. They're survivors, he said, just like you. They're copies, she snapped. You took everything Echo stood for and twisted it. He stepped closer, rainwater dripping from his jacket. You talk like Echo was pure, like we didn't kill for convenience. You think I forgot Cole's face, Haynes, Vega. You think I don't see them every time I close my eyes. Her voice cracked. Then why do this? Rhys looked at her for a long time, a soldier studying a wound that never healed. Because the world doesn't deserve heroes that die quietly, he said. It needs soldiers that don't die at all. Lena shook her head, tears mixing with rain. You're not saving anyone. You're just trying to make sure your guilt lives forever. He almost smiled. Maybe, but at least guilt feels something. These new Echo units won't. Her voice softened. And what about you, Aaron, do you? Something flickered in his eyes, the smallest trace of humanity breaking through the steel. I did once, he whispered. When you called me, sir, without hatting me for it. The silence stretched between them, thick, fragile. The hum of servers filled the space like a heartbeat. Then the alarm blared. Red lights washed over the corridor. Mason's voice cut through her earpiece, urgent. Ward, we've got a problem. The network's spiking. Someone's rerouting the data to command. They're uploading the Asterian framework. Her eyes widened. From where? Inside the Pentagon's encrypted servers. Someone on the inside is helping him. Her mind raced. Who? Before Mason could answer, Rhys spoke, almost casually. You think I built this alone? She turned to him, realization dawning. You had help, someone with clearance. He nodded once. They believed in what we were doing even if they couldn't admit it. And now, by the time you destroy this base, Asterian will live everywhere. Every command system, every black site unit, every algorithm. He smiled faintly. You can't kill an idea, Wraith. You of all people should know that. Her pulse spiked. Maybe not, but I can still kill the man behind it. She raised her weapon. Rhys didn't move. Then pull the trigger, end it, but before you do, look around, tell me the truth. He gestured toward the screens. How many soldiers died because they hesitated? How many missions failed because someone questioned an order? You wanted to start over, Lena. I gave you the chance to make sure no one ever had to start over again. Her hands trembled. He wasn't wrong, not completely. The words clawed at something deep inside her, that old guilt, the part of her that still woke in the middle of the night hearing the echo of Cole's last breath. Rhys saw it in her eyes and stepped closer. You still think you're broken because of me, but maybe you survived because of me. Her voice was a whisper now. No, Aaron, I survived in spite of you. And then another voice cut through the comms. Ward, it's Mason, they found me. Gunfire crackled faintly through the line. Her chest seized. Sir Mason. Listen to me, he said between breaths. The mole's real. It's someone high up, a colonel in command. He's trying to lock me out. You have to finish this before they trigger the upload. Where are you? She demanded. 2 miles out. They've got my convoy pinned. Static swallowed his voice. Lena's pulse hammered. She looked back at Rhys, rage and fear colliding inside her. Call them off. He tilted his head. You still think you're in control. That was the last straw. She lunged forward, slamming him against the console. The monitors shattered around them. His elbow caught her ribs, but she didn't let go. Years of training turned into instinct. The fight was fast, close, brutal. No wasted movement, no words. He swung, she ducked. She struck, he blocked. Two ghosts trading blows in the tomb they'd built together. At one point, their faces were inches apart, breath against breath. His eyes were wild, hers full of fire. "Echo doesn't die," he growled. "Then I'll be the first," she spat back, driving her knee into his chest. He stumbled, hit the ground. She leveled her weapon again. "End it," he rasped. "Do it." Her hands shook, not from weakness, from memory. From all the moments she hadn't pulled the trigger when she should have. From every time she'd chosen mercy and paid in blood. And then she lowered the gun. Rias blinked, stunned. "You can't." She stepped back, voice steady. "That's the difference between us. You killed to build something empty. I'll fight to rebuild something human." He laughed, a hollow, broken sound. "Then you'll lose." "Maybe," she said, "but I'll lose as myself." She turned, fired at the main console. Sparks burst. Alarms screamed. The uplink systems shorted out, the red lights flickering wildly. Rias roared, trying to reach the controls, but it was too late. The servers overloaded, data streams collapsing one by one. The digital heartbeat of Asterion began to die. "Lena, stop," he shouted, his voice cracking. "You're killing them, all of them." She looked back. "No, I'm setting them free." And with that, she pulled the final charge from her belt and armed it. Rias's eyes went wide. "You wouldn't." "Watch me." She threw it against the reactor core. The explosion was instantaneous, a blinding flash of white and heat that swallowed everything. Miles away, Mason's vehicle was overturned in mud. Smoke rose from the wreckage. His radio crackled faintly. "Ward, Lena, respond." "Nothing." He pulled himself from the wreck, coughing, one arm bleeding. The rain came down harder now, washing blood into the earth. "Come on, kid," he whispered. "Say something." The comm remained silent. He looked toward the mountain, now glowing faintly orange under the storm. The ground rumbled with distant thunder and something deeper, the sound of endings. He stood there for a long time, the rain cold against his face, the sky lit by the fire of a dying machine. Then faintly, through the static, a single voice. "Mason, it's done." He froze. "Ward." "Facility's gone, so is he." "Are you clear?" "Working on it." And then the line went dead again. He exhaled shakily, half in relief, half in dread. Because in that last fragment of her voice, he'd heard something else, not victory. Resignation. Inside the mountain, smoke filled the corridors. Fire crawled along the walls. The main chamber was collapsing, metal shrieking as supports gave way. Lena staggered through the wreckage, coughing, one hand clutching her side. The world was tilting, spinning, falling apart around her. She could barely see. Behind her, through the flames, Rias's voice echoed weakly. "Lena, don't leave me here." She stopped. For a heartbeat, she considered it. Then she turned back. He was pinned under debris, face pale, blood trailing down his temple. Even now, even dying, he looked defiant. "You should have taken the shot," he rasped. She crouched beside him, breath ragged. "You don't get it. That's the only shot I refuse to take." She reached down, grabbed his arm, and pulled hard. The beam shifted enough to free him halfway. He gasped, coughing, stunned that she'd even tried. "Why?" he managed. She looked at him, eyes tired but clear. "Because I don't bury people anymore. I just walk away." And with that, she left him there, limping toward the collapsing exit as the fire swallowed the last pieces of the world they'd built. Outside, the mountain burned. Rain hissed against molten rock. Thunder rolled. Lena Ward emerged from the smoke, half broken, half alive. Behind her, the Asterion facility imploded in a rush of flame and dust. She stood there in the rain for a long time, staring at the sky, eyes blank, chest heaving, tears lost in the storm. Mason found her minutes later, running toward her through the mud. "Ward." She turned slowly, managed a faint smile. "Told you I'd finish it." He looked at her, the cuts, the burns, the exhaustion, and shook his head. "You shouldn't have had to." She glanced back at the ruins. Neither should anyone else. The storm began to fade, leaving only smoke and silence. Because sometimes the loudest victories don't roar. They breathe. And sometimes survival isn't triumph. It's testimony. The fire burned for 3 days. They said it was the rain that finally drowned it, but Mason knew better. It wasn't the storm that ended Asterion. It was her. When the smoke finally lifted from the mountain, Fort Hamilton stood under a strange stillness. Soldiers spoke in whispers. Command issued reports with more blanks than sentences. They called it a containment incident. They said no names. No one mentioned Echo Team. Mason sat alone in his office, staring at a single file on his desk, black cover, red stamp, classified, do not reopen. He hadn't slept in days. His uniform hung heavy on him, damp from rain that had followed him all the way back. The mountain still lived behind his eyes, the smell of smoke, the taste of metal, the sound of her voice before the line went silent. He had replayed that moment 100 times. The explosion, the silence. Then her words, "It's done." And then nothing. But she had walked out. He'd seen her. Half dead, yes, but alive. Now, as the wind rattled the window, the door creaked open. "Sir," said the medic quietly, "she's awake." Mason stood immediately. The recovery wing was quiet, just the rhythmic hum of machines and the steady drip of IV lines. Lena lay against white sheets, pale but awake, her arm bandaged, her face turned toward the morning light. For the first time in years, the sun touched her skin without reflecting off armor or weapon steel. She heard footsteps before she saw him. "Sir," she said softly. Mason gave a faint smile. "I told you to call me David." She chuckled weakly. "Feels weird, you still outrank me." "Not anymore," he said. "I put in my retirement papers this morning." She blinked. "You're serious?" He nodded. "I've seen enough ghosts." She looked away, eyes distant. "Yeah, we both have." He sat beside her bed, hands clasped. "They'll spin it, you know, turn it into something neat and clean. Say the fire destroyed an experimental data site. Call it a loss of property, not people." "Good," she said quietly. "Maybe it's better that way." Mason frowned. "You really believe that?" She nodded. "The world doesn't need to remember Echo. It needs to remember what happens when people stop asking why." He watched her for a long moment. Then he said softly, "You still dream about it." She smiled faintly, not from joy, but from the tired honesty that comes after surviving too much. "Every night, but the faces change. Used to be my team. Now it's them. The new ones, the copies. They didn't ask for any of it." "You set them free," he said. She turned to him. "Did I? Or did I just destroy the only proof we ever existed?" Mason leaned back, sighing. "Existence isn't proof. What you did out there, that's what makes it real." She looked down at her wrist. The bandages covered the mark, but she could still feel it burning faintly beneath, the black skull that had followed her through every shadow. "Funny," she murmured. "That thing used to feel like a curse. And now—" she smiled faintly. "Now it feels like a warning label." Outside, the base moved on. Trucks came and went. New recruits trained on the same field where she once led that run. The same frost, the same silence. But now, when her name was whispered, it wasn't mockery. It was respect, quiet, careful, earned. Mason watched her from a distance sometimes. The way she walked slower now, more deliberate. The way she looked at the sky before dawn, like she was waiting for something to appear there. He knew she wasn't waiting for orders. She was waiting for forgiveness. And forgiveness, he knew, doesn't come in medals or memorials. It comes in the quiet decision to live again. Weeks later, she stood alone at the edge of the field. The wind carried the scent of rain and metal. She wasn't in uniform anymore, just a simple jacket, sleeves rolled down. In her pocket was Cole's dog tag. Mason had found it among the recovered debris of the mountain. It was blackened, half melted, but the name still showed. She turned it over in her hand, feeling its weight. "Hey, Cole," she whispered. "You were right, it was a setup." She smiled sadly. "But I made it mean something, I promise." The wind carried her words away. Behind her, footsteps approached. Mason again, his tone lighter this time. "You planning to stay here?" She shrugged. "For a while, maybe longer. Someone's got to teach these rookies not to mock the quiet ones." He smiled, fitting. She turned toward him, eyes soft. "You know, I used to think surviving was the hardest part. And now I think it's knowing what for." He nodded. "And do you?" She looked out toward the field, the recruits running in formation, laughing, alive. "Not yet," she said, "but I'm learning." He smiled faintly. "That's enough." They stood there in silence, the sun climbing higher, the frost melting into morning mist. For a moment the world felt lighter, not healed, not perfect, just breathing. But somewhere far away, deep beneath a city that didn't know what it was built on, a single monitor flickered to life. Static, then an image. A man's face, bruised, pale, eyes sharp as glass. Aaron Reyes. He stared into the camera, voice hoarse but calm. "Echo lives." The screen glitched, code streaming across it, thousands of data fragments reassembling like veins of light. You can't erase evolution, you can only delay it. Then the image faded, the system went dark. Back at Fort Hamilton, Lane awoke in the middle of the night. No alarms, no sound, just that strange, instinctive stillness that comes before memory finds you again. She sat up slowly, staring at the wall where the moonlight fell through the blinds. Her reflection in the glass looked older, harder, but there was something else in her eyes now, peace, maybe, or its closest relative. She reached for her wrist and traced the outline of the hidden mark beneath the gauze. It didn't hurt anymore. She whispered softly to the empty room. "Echo lives, yeah, but so do I." And she lay back down. Outside, dawn was beginning to rise, soft light spilling over the training fields, washing the frost into silver. Somewhere under that growing sun, recruits ran past the track where it all began. None of them knew the story. None of them saw the ghosts, but that was okay. Because courage doesn't need witnesses. It just needs one person to stand, one person to stay, one person to remember what silence costs. And sometimes, the ones who walk away aren't running from the past. They're carrying it, so the rest of the world doesn't have to. The camera would fade then, from the rising sun, to the faint outline of a black skull printed on fabric, blurred and fading as the light swallows it. And over that image, a single voice, hers, quiet, resolute, echoing. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.